Welcome to Disruption Dialogues Podcast Season 2. Listen to the influential leaders and trailblazers from around the world as they share invaluable insights to navigating the fifth industrial revolution.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Disruption Dialogues Season 2. I'm Sarwant Singh, President and Chief Commercial Officer at MarketsandMarkets. Today, I'm in conversation with Ilya Gutlin, Senior Vice President, Asia Pacific at Alcatel-Lucent Enterprise. Ilya has a number of achievements, but key ones being he led the restructuring of a billion-dollar division. Thank you, Ilya, for joining us today. As the world's air traffic is expected to grow 4x by 2040, the future of airports will rely on sustainable solutions, digital transformation, and intelligent operations to ensure efficacy and optimization in airport management. By the end of next decade, 50 mega airports will attain sustainability and energy management to achieve 100% carbon neutral emissions. The airport of the future will be digitalized and transformed with increasing use of intelligent technologies for building a digital core as the backbone of airport operations. The global airports will prioritize digital spending to adopt technologies such as artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, 5G, robotics, even become autonomous airports. And this will all improve efficiencies and shift to what we call the Sustainable Airport 4.0. Annual investments in airport digitalization to rise from about 7 billion in 2022 to over 9 billion by 2030, growing at a healthy CAGR of 5%. So, firstly, Ilya, what do you believe is the future of airports?
Well, before we talk about the future of airports or airport of the future, I think we need to sort of talk a little bit about the stakeholders in the current airport and what it represents to them. Now, some joke that an airport is really a big shopping mall with a runway attached. Now, I kind of look at airports as a very complex mix of a factory environment and then a very targeted shopping or retail experience. Now, when you look at the stakeholders within that airport, within the airport, obviously there's the airport itself. And what the airport wants to do is to get the passengers through the necessities of the normal formalities, and then get them into the shops, into the restaurants, into the bars. The airlines really want to get the passenger into their seats on time before departure so that they can take off on time. The passengers themselves, well, the passengers are actually a fairly diverse group. The business passengers are more aligned with the airlines in that they just want to get into their seat. They want to walk through the airport and get in and get to their destination as soon as possible. Now, the leisure passengers are obviously there for the experience. So they want the shopping, they want the bars, the restaurants, and they want to really enjoy every moment of the way. Now, the last major stakeholder is obviously the government. Now, the government, what they want to do is focus on the 99.99%. They don't want to focus on the 99.99% of the passengers that just want to get to their destination. What they want is to focus on the bad guys and make sure that they're not disrupting the traffic around the world. Now, when you understand what these stakeholders need, you can then talk about what does the future of the airport really represent to them. And really the future of the airports from the passenger side, it's really to be able to walk through to what they want to do to their destination and really keeping the factory, the processing environment to a minimum. It's got to be in the background. For the airports, well, they know that a stressed passenger does not shop. Study after study showed that the airports have got to be, the passengers have got to be fairly relaxed in order to go shopping, to go to the restaurants, to go to the bars. The airlines, again, they're focused on the turnaround and they just want the passenger through the airport. And the government authorities, they want to know about the passengers before they get to the airport. And all three of the major stakeholders really would like to see where the passenger is in the airport as we're moving from the doors right to the gates. So that's the environment. And again, whether it's technologies, whether it's a lack of process, but this is where the airports are going through.
Thank you, Ilya. Thank you very much. So what are the future key digital transformation that you see in the airport sector? What does the digital airport 4.0 look like?
Well, to me, again, the digital transformation of the airports has started decades ago, and it really depends on the process. You've got the passengers, and the passengers are there for a seamless environment. And be it biometrics, be it cloud, be it other technologies, it doesn't really matter what sensors you're using, what cameras the airports are using. The passengers just want to be able to walk through with the least amount of stress. And study after study shows that whenever there's a choke point, be it security, be it immigration, where the passenger does not have control of the environment, the passenger gets stressed. The passengers don't like to queue. Now, for the baggage, to me, it's a mix, because baggage is where a lot of the future environment will be impacted. You know, how 50% of the bags get lost in transit. 50% of the bags that get lost, they get lost in transit. So how do you prevent that? Are you able to use cameras? Are you able to use other sensors in order to make sure that the bags are able to jump from, I guess, from the arriving airline onto the departing airline or the departing aircraft? For the operations environment, it's about disruption management and being able to manage disruptions with minimal amount of people. And for the ATM, for the air traffic management, it is really about unified sky, because what you've got coming in is you've got drones, you've got unmanned area vehicles, the UAVs, that are going to be impacting the sky over the next few years. So again, the airport of the future is really one that uses technology to hide the complexity of the airport environment for many of its stakeholders.
I'll ask the question, what are some of the emerging and attractive use cases that are being enabled by digital transformation?
Again, before we ask that question, we need to think about the process holistically. And the reason I say that is because a lot of times it is a process that needs to be questioned before technology is introduced. So before we go digital, let's look at what happens end to end between the airlines, the airports, the government officials, and the passengers in order to create a much smoother flow. So when you look at, for example, IATA introducing e-tickets about 15 years ago or so, what the e-ticket did is it really just masked a process of ticketing between the airlines and the travel agents. It didn't really introduce anything new. So when you look at a process overall, for example, the check-in process, I think a question needs to be asked as to why does check-in exist in airports? Why do we go through that process? I mean, in Europe, some of the low-cost airlines allow you to check in 60 days in advance or 30 days in advance. Well, why bother doing it all together? I understand bag drop, and I understand the need to drop your bags before, I guess, with a certain amount of time before you depart. But then check-in is really an inefficient process. So to me, when we talk about Airport 4.0, when we talk about the passenger experience and the airline experience in the airports, we need to really look at what would make the process more efficient and then align the technologies to go with it, whether it's biometrics, whether it's cameras, LiDAR, sensors. I mean, technologies are out there. A lot of technologies exist now, but you need to do it end to end as how it fits in with the use case and the process as well.
Thank you, Ilya. Ilya, what's your view on 5G? I mean, it's talked a lot about in airports. Any particular feedback from you on 5G in airports?
Well, interestingly enough, in the survey that I mentioned, the CETA survey, airports, the one technology that the airports are looking to intently is 5G. And the reason being is because it increases the connectivity, and the ability to share data to, I guess, to transfer data within and outside of the airport using 5G networks. So to me, it's going to be really a helpful tool for the airports. But again, let's come back to the fact that let's look at the use cases that 5G can handle for the airports and where are the dead spots that 5G technology will be helping them with.
And yeah, I was interestingly talking to an organization the other day, and they were saying sustainability is huge for airports. So the question I have for you is, how can digitization enable sustainability in airports? Any views on it?
Oh, absolutely. I think over the past 6, 7 years, the airports and the airlines have been looking intently into sustainability. I know that ACI, Airport Council International, has introduced a number of sustainability awards for the airlines. One of the major airports in Asia, even though it's been going through probably one of the worst shutdowns during COVID, they've got almost 4 dozen people on their sustainability team. So the airports are taking it very, very seriously. And this is identified as one of the major problems for the aviation industry. And I think the aviation industry is responding a lot of times quietly, but responding towards meeting some of the sustainability challenges. And what technology does is it improves operational efficiency. It improves it through data transfer, through just being more efficient in the way you move people or vehicles or airplanes, and therefore, again, helping the sustainability concerns for the aviation industry.
Thank you, Ilya. Thank you very much. Ilya, can you tell us a little bit about Alcatel-Lucent's products and services in digitalization of airports?
Sure. Alcatel-Lucent Enterprise is a provider of networking and communication services equipment. We've got our own cloud solution as well. All of our solutions, all of our network solutions are actually IoT ready. And what that means is if you've got an Alcatel-Lucent network in the airport, you would be able to introduce new IoT solutions, both on the hardware side and on the software side, without really a huge impact or a huge further investment into your networks. So when I look at my region, there's an airport just south of Singapore where we've done what we call a converged network, which means that we've gone out and we've installed a network, meaning switches and access points, but also the communication services solution. For airlines, we've got China Eastern. Eastern is a great client of ours where we've installed a communication services network where the agents in each office of China Eastern, both in China and outside of China, can now call for free using the Alcatel-Lucent network. And in Brazil and Sao Paulo airport, again, we've gone out and we've installed a converged network where we do both communication services for the staff as well as networking to make sure that that rapid growth that you had in Brazil over the past few years is sustained through the networking solution that we put into the airport.
Thank you, Ilya. Ilya, last question, a bit more personal. I believe you've traveled more than me, over 80 countries, and you've written a book, and you speak 3 languages. And what can you share based on your personal experiences for anybody who's sort of joining or entering this industry? What advice would you give them?
Well, on the personal side, and thank you very much for the question. Yes, I've been traveling pretty much my whole life. I've had a number of different experiences. The one thing I could tell you is the more difficult the experience gets at that time, the better the memories are afterwards. And I started traveling by myself with a backpack, and I guess I'm traveling with 4 kids in tow over the past few years, all over Asia and Europe. Now, when COVID hit, and I really don't want to come back to that, but when COVID hit and government started shutting the doors and people stopped traveling, I remember talking to my wife and I said, I hope this does not end up in a war. And the reason for it is when people start shutting their doors, start shutting their borders, the normal fear of people that are not like you, of xenophobia, actually increases. And the rhetoric increases as well. So for me, travel is something that makes this world a lot smaller. It makes it a lot more interesting. And it really drives a lot of the, a lot of the ideas exchange as well, besides just bringing everyone together in a fairly interesting environment.
Thank you, Ilya. And I guess Is there anything you are picking up, especially with you being in Asia, how the Asian market is different when it comes to digitalization of airports compared to the West?
Interestingly enough, what I see in a global industry like aviation is the movements of technology are very similar. The processes are very similar, but what you have in Asia is, I think, the focus on service, the people aspect is a lot greater than it is in Europe or North America. The culture is to be able to really, I guess, identify the problem and resolve that problem. So it's something that that is really prevalent across this continent.
Thank you, Ilya, for such an interesting discussion. It was really informative, and I learned a lot personally. I believe for an airport IT company of the future, any future product portfolio will require access to a diverse and digitally enabled portfolio, and that's what you have really sort of brought out today. This, which I believe will need to span across IT, OT, or other technologies that can deliver digital transformation. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. I was in conversation with Ilya Gutlin, Senior Vice President, APAC at Alcatel-Lucent Enterprise. Thank you, Ilya, once again. Stay tuned for such interesting episodes on Disruption Dialogues.
Thank you, Sarwant.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to know how you can navigate and thrive in this disruptive era, subscribe to Disruption Dialogues on your go-to podcast channels and stay tuned for more interesting episodes.